In the winter of 1944, within the quiet, snow-dusted landscape of Buckhannon, West Virginia, a 10-year-old boy named Newton Anderson was engaged in a routine chore that was common to nearly every household in the Appalachian region. He was sitting by the fireplace in his parents' home, watching his father prepare fuel for the evening heat. In those days, coal was the lifeblood of the state, harvested from deep subterranean seams and delivered in large, jagged chunks that required manual labor to break down into sizes suitable for the family stove. As his father swung a heavy hammer against a particularly large block of bituminous coal, the stone split with a sharp, echoing crack. From the very heart of that ancient black mass, an object tumbled onto the floor, clattering against the hearth. It was small, dark, and roughly the size of a child's fist, initially indistinguishable from the debris surrounding it. The young boy reached out and retrieved the object, his fingers becoming stained with the fine, greasy dust of the Carboniferous era. As he rubbed the soot away, the true nature of the find revealed itself. It was not a strangely shaped rock, nor was it a fossilized remnant of prehistoric flora. Resting in his palm was a cast metal bell. It possessed a clearly defined handle and a functional clapper suspended within its hollow interior. The form was unmistakable, a product of deliberate design, requiring a casting mold and a level of metallurgical sophistication that only a human hand could achieve. When Anderson shook it, the bell actually rang. The sound was quiet and somewhat muffled, a dull resonance that suggested the metal had been compressed within a dense, airtight environment for a duration so vast it had nearly lost its ability to vibrate. Yet, despite the eons of silence, it still functioned. The mystery of the bell is rooted in the geology of the coal from which it emerged. The specific seam worked by the local mine in Buckhannon is dated by geologists to the Carboniferous period, an epoch that occurred approximately 300 million years ago. To place this in perspective, the Carboniferous was a time of vast, swampy forests and giant insects. It predates the dinosaurs, first primates, and certainly any form of hominid ancestor. According to the established timeline of natural history, there were no creatures on Earth capable of grasping a tool, let alone mastering the complex science of metallurgy and mold making. Yet, there it was, a sophisticated alloyed object found inside a sealed geological formation from the deep past. Decades later, when Newton Anderson had grown into a man, he sought to understand what he had found. Scientific analysis would eventually reveal that the bell was composed of an alloy that defies easy categorization. It contains a specific combination of metals that does not correspond to any known casting tradition, whether from the ancient Mediterranean, the empires of Asia, or the industrial foundries of the modern West. Anderson kept the bell throughout his entire life, guarding it against the typical fate of such anomalies. It was never lost, never stolen, and never surrendered to an institution that might have misplaced it in a basement archive. It remains a physical, tangible reality, an impossible artifact that challenges the very foundations of our understood history. However, the Anderson bell was far from an isolated incident. Nearly a century prior, in 1852, a similar enigma surfaced in Dorchester, Massachusetts. During a massive construction project at Meeting House Hill, workers were engaged in blasting through a geological formation known as pudding stone conglomerate. This rock is significantly older than coal, with geologists dating it to the late Precambrian era, somewhere between 600 million and 1 billion years ago. Following a controlled explosion that shattered a large section of the stone, the workers discovered a metal vessel sitting among the rubble. As reported by Scientific American in its June 1852 issue, the object was bell-shaped, standing approximately 4.5 inches tall, with a base diameter of 6.5 inches. Its surface was not plain. It was intricately decorated with floral patterns and inlaid with what appeared to be fine silver. The explosion had split the vessel into two pieces, allowing observers to see a zinc-colored interior that showed absolutely no signs of corrosion or oxidation. The report noted that the object had been blown out of solid rock 15 feet below the surface. For a brief period, the Dorchester vessel was a local sensation, examined by naturalists and displayed to the public. Then, as if following a script that would become all too familiar, it vanished. No museum officially cataloged it, and no private collector came forward to preserve it. It existed in the scientific literature for a few months, and then simply evaporated from the physical world. Yet the description provided in the 1852 accounts remained. When modern metallurgists reviewed the details, the silver inlay, the zinc-like luster, and the specific bell-like geometry, they concluded that the craftsmanship did not align with any known historical metalworking techniques. It was the first recorded instance of a bell-shaped anomaly being extracted from rock that should, by all accounts, be barren of human influence. This began a pattern of discovery and subsequent disappearance that would repeat with mechanical precision for the next century and a half. Newton Anderson's decision to keep his bell for 60 years proved to be the exception to this rule. Anderson was a man of practical Appalachian sensibilities, raised in a culture that valued tangible evidence and maintained a healthy skepticism of large institutions. For him, the bell was not a case study or a data point. It was a strange object that sat on his shelf through the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, and the turn of the millennium. It was only in 2007 that he finally allowed a formal metallurgical analysis to be conducted. The laboratory results were both specific and deeply unsettling to the scientific status quo. The bell's primary composition was a mixture of copper, zinc, and tin, but the ratios were entirely anomalous. The zinc content was significantly higher than what is found in standard bronze or brass formulations from any known historical period. Furthermore, the alloy contained trace amounts of aluminum, arsenic, iodine, and selenium. The analyzing metallurgist noted that these proportions appeared deliberate. In the world of metallurgy, deliberate implies that someone consciously chose to include these elements to achieve specific physical properties. The presence of selenium is particularly damning to the traditional historical narrative. Selenium was not even identified as a distinct chemical element until 1817 by Jens Jacob Berzelius. Incorporating it into a metal alloy in controlled, precise amounts requires an advanced understanding of chemistry and high-temperature industrial processes, technology that did not exist in any documented civilization prior to the 19th century. Yet the bell was found inside a chunk of coal that had been underground since the Carboniferous. The coal showed no evidence of intrusion, no cracks, no secondary mineralization, and no indication that the bell had been inserted into the seam at a later date. It was embedded in the coal in the same manner that a fossilized leaf or a prehistoric bone is embedded in sedimentary rock. It was present when the organic material first began to compress and mineralize 300 million years ago. When Newton Anderson passed away in 2015, the bell was entrusted to his family, who continued to preserve it. It remains one of the few out-of-place artifacts, or parts, that can still be physically examined. Its alloy remains a signature of a lost or unknown technological tradition that finds no parallel in the archaeological record of any known civilization on Earth. Looking back through history, we find other fragments of this mystery. In 1885, at a foundry in Wolfsegg, Austria, a miner named Isidor Braun broke open a block of tertiary lignite, coal approximately 15 million years old. Inside, he discovered a small, metallic object shaped like a parallelepiped, featuring flat faces and remarkably sharp edges. This became known as the Wolfsegg iron. Initial analysis showed it to be an iron-carbon alloy, but it possessed anomalous traces of nickel that did not match the chemical signature of meteoric iron. For a time, it was housed in the Heimehaus Museum in Linz, but as the years passed, its geological context was downplayed. It was eventually moved to storage and reclassified as a mere curiosity, its impossible origin reduced to a footnote in the museum's records. In 1891, the Morrisonville Times in Illinois reported on an incident involving a woman named Mrs. S. W. Culp. While breaking a lump of carboniferous coal to feed her kitchen stove, she discovered a fine gold chain, approximately 10 inches in length, embedded within the rock. The workmanship was described as exquisite, and crucially, both ends of the chain remained firmly sealed within the unbroken mass of the coal chunk until she pulled them free. Local jewelers who examined the artifact confirmed it was 8-karat gold. Like the Dorchester vessel, the story was published, sparked a brief moment of wonder, and then the artifact vanished into history. The list continues. In 1897, a mine in Webster City, Iowa, yielded a carved stone with strange geometric patterns found in a coal seam deep underground. In 1912, 2 workers at the Thomas Electric Plant in Oklahoma were splitting coal when an iron pot fell out of a large chunk. This discovery was so jarring that it was documented in a formal, signed affidavit by the witnesses. Every one of these discoveries shares 3 distinct, haunting features. First, the objects are clearly manufactured, displaying evidence of casting, carving, or intricate assembly. Second, the geological context in which they were found places them millions of years before the accepted emergence of the human species. Third, the objects almost always follow a path toward obscurity. They are either lost, stolen, or reclassified by institutions until they are deemed irrelevant. Until recently, very few people had connected these dots. No one had pointed out that these metal objects repeatedly take on similar forms: bells, vessels, and hollow cast containers. Nor had anyone noted that when these objects are subjected to analysis, they consistently reveal an impossible metallurgical signature. The alloy is the smoking gun. If these were merely random objects made of common iron or bronze found in random places, they could be dismissed as modern trash that somehow worked its way into the ground. But the chemical consistency tells a different story. The Anderson bell's mix of copper, zinc, and tin with arsenic and selenium is mirrored in the descriptions of other lost artifacts. The Dorchester vessel's silver-inlaid, zinc-colored interior suggests a high zinc-copper alloy similar to the one found in West Virginia. The Wolfseg iron's specific nickel-to-carbon ratio points to a specialized steelmaking process. A researcher named John Helfenstein spent over a decade meticulously collecting metallurgical data on every known anomalous metal object recovered from geological deposits. His research, while circulating among the alternative history community, has been ignored by mainstream academia. No peer-reviewed journal will publish a paper that requires the total abandonment of the established geological and biological timeline. Helfenstein's data indicates that these objects cluster into 2 primary alloy families: high zinc-copper alloys with trace selenium and iron-carbon alloys with anomalous nickel. These are not the recipes of the Bronze Age or the Iron Age as we know them. They represent a consistent, sophisticated metallurgical tradition that appears across 2 continents and is separated by millions of years of geological time. It is as if a single, enduring technological culture left its signature in the very crust of the Earth, spanning epochs that our current understanding of history cannot even begin to reconcile. The disappearance of these objects is not an accident. It is a function of how our knowledge-bearing institutions operate. The Dorchester vessel was gone within months. The Morrisonville gold chain vanished after its initial newspaper appearance. The Webster City stone was erased from the record entirely. The Oklahoma pot survives only as a legal document. The Wolfseg iron was stripped of its context until it became a meaningless piece of metal in a drawer. Newton Anderson's bell only survived because it remained in a private home, shielded from the bureaucratic impulse to file away anything that threatens the prevailing paradigm. When researchers have attempted to use the Freedom of Information Act to locate records of these out-of-place artifacts, they are frequently met with claims that no such records exist. This is despite the fact that many of these objects were documented in the scientific and popular press of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The mechanism of suppression is subtle but effective. An object is found, it is briefly reported as an anomaly, and then it is absorbed by a system designed to categorize it into non-existence. Museums index them under the wrong headings, archives lose the provenance papers, Journals fail to provide follow-up studies. Within a single generation, the physical evidence is gone, and the story is relegated to the realm of urban legend or hoax. The standard rebuttal from the scientific community is the contamination theory. This argument suggests that the objects are modern and simply fell into deep cracks or fissures in the coal seams over time. While this might explain an object found near the surface or at a geological fault line, it fails to account for objects like the Anderson bell or the Dorchester vessel. These were found in the center of solid, intact chunks of rock and coal. In the case of the bell, the coal had formed a perfect impression of the object's surface, indicating that the material was still soft and sedimentary when it enveloped the bell. There were no fissures, no secondary mineral fills, and no discoloration to suggest an intrusion. For the Anderson bell, the implications are staggering. It was present 300 million years ago. For the Dorchester vessel, the timeline stretches back over 500 million years. Geologists do not argue with the age of the rock, they argue with the existence of the objects. Their logic is circular. Because humans did not exist 300 million years ago, any object that looks human-made must be modern, regardless of the geological evidence to the contrary. But this logic ignores the physical reality of the artifacts. The gap in our understanding is the size of a cast metal bell that still rings when you shake it. The historical window for these discoveries is also telling. Most of these artifacts were found between 1850 and 1950. This was the century when industrial coal mining was at its peak, and coal was still being broken and sorted by hand. Millions of tons of carboniferous rock were being brought to the surface and examined by human eyes for the first time in history. Before this era, the seams were sealed and inaccessible. Today, the window has closed. Modern mining is a highly mechanized process that uses massive crushers and conveyor belts to pulverize coal into uniform sizes before it is ever seen by a person. Any bells, pots, or chains still hidden in the coal are being ground into powder, fed into furnaces, and scattered as fly ash. We are destroying the evidence of our planet's hidden history at an industrial scale, unaware that the message is even there. Alternative historians, including those interested in the Tartaria or Great Reset theories, see these bells as part of a larger tapestry of suppressed truth. They point to grand architectural feats with no construction records, census data that seems to reset at arbitrary points, and the sudden appearance of vast amounts of capital in certain families as evidence of a pre-reset civilization. These artifacts suggest that something, or someone, existed long before the official start of the human story. They built, they cast metal, and they left behind objects that were eventually swallowed by the shifting crust of the earth, becoming time capsules buried in the deep time of geology. Newton Anderson's bell remains the most potent piece of evidence we have. It has been photographed from every angle, its alloy has been documented by professional labs, and its story has been vetted by generations of researchers. It survived not because of the strength of the scientific evidence, the Dorchester vessel had that too, but because of the stubbornness of a family in West Virginia who refused to let go of a piece of their own history. The bell still rings. After 300 million years of being encased in a tomb of pressurized carbon, the clapper still strikes the inner wall and produces a sound. The metal has not corroded, suggesting a stability that modern metallurgy can only envy. If you were to travel to Buckhannon today, you could find the descendants of Newton Anderson and perhaps hear that sound for yourself. It is a haunting resonance. It is the sound of a question asked across an unimaginable gulf of time. It was left there by someone who understood the secrets of the earth and the forge, someone who knew how to create something that would last forever. They left it in a place where only a miner or a young boy by a fire would ever find it. And as of yet, we have not found the courage to truly answer the question that the bell is asking. We are left only with the sound, a ringing reminder that the history we are taught is only a small, curated fraction of the truth.